fucking bass head. I told you that. Everybody knows the Lords have that sound now, sir. It's a sound that nobody else has. That's the thing. If he asks fucking 20 other guys to send them music, they're all gonna sound kind of the same.
Bitch, I got the heat. Yeah. You know we bring that G shit.
So you can see this is, for me, a very practical example of how we can create this great build-up and this tension, and then we can really flip it. This type of big build we mentioned at the beginning, been done before, right? It's been done many times in progressive house, and it's super massive, half a minute or so build ups, go into another song, right? And you can use it to your advantage and then completely just switch it over. So you give something to people that's familiar with, and then people are like, come on. And then it's, from my perspective, it's almost more satisfying. People sort of like, okay, they're very familiar with it, right? And then you just completely switch it over. So you've given something to people they're very familiar with, and then you switch it over to something else that completely opposite. It's exciting, right? Knowing your moments, knowing when to do that is key. I did it already like super quick beforehand, and I did something like this again. It's not as impactful. Tension release, okay? Tonally, it's a good example of this. Jet's a great example. Tonally having those really intense moments and then break. And then, it really showcases the musicianship there when you have, those super intense moments and then the break. Tool is a great example of this, having those very melodic ballads, but then also having the really intense moments. And even though some of the moments might be a bit too long for my taste, when the more sort of upbeat, alternative, distortion elements come in, they're so satisfying because you have this glorious drum and musicianship, orchestral 5-6 minute ballad, and then when it goes into distortion and ramping up, it's so much more satisfying. And there's some great bands that do this very, very well. So Metallica is a great example of this, having those glorious melodic sort of intros, those kind of moments, right? And then they go straight into like thrash metal, or like, the really heavy moments, but they, strange my voice there. But that contrast is key. And those moments, those heavy moments, are so much more satisfying when you have that contrast. If it's just heavy nonstop, it's not as heavy after the third song, right? But if you add in like a ballad, halfway through you go into like super intense thrash metal section, it's so much more rewarding and satisfying. So, this tension release is key, and that's something that's universal for us. We understand this balancing act. The sun, the rainbow coming out after a storm or something like that, after the rain. That kind of feeling, having that contrast is important in life, gives you excitement in life. Everything is just the same and it's bland and it gets boring. You need that contrast. And that's something that I would love to see more of in mixes. And it's something, unfortunately, I don't see enough of. And if you are one of those people who are looking to incorporate more alternative genres and stuff like that, please do take this as inspiration. I think this is a great starting point for something like this. You have this more progressive style build, and you are working with a build up, right? And then you can switch it into another completely different style of music, and it creates something fresh for that moment. Yeah. So then how would you approach it in your music? You're picking the right music. Again, there's trial and error practice. Picking different songs and seeing how you can blend them together, right? How that might work. And sometimes just being courageous and just going left field with something. That's also a great idea. Nothing wrong with that. But just be careful having pockets and making sure that you maintain energy, right? When you are switching, one caveat I would say is that you want to find a song that has a similar type of energy, right? For something like this, when you are switching completely to a different style, right? You want to make sure it holds its own weight. And for something like that, you need something that it's big, it's heavy, it's in your face. For it to have its own presence and its own space. particularly if you are building and building like this. The more you build, the more intense that answer needs to be. The more you give a call, you risk losing the mix if it doesn't live up to the build that you're creating. So yeah, that's just a caveat. Creating a big sort of tension moment and then effectively creating a live edit and really working with the energy, the speed of the mix that's happening and capitalizing on that energy. So you notice we don't lose that energy, right? We keep going and we maintain the same high energy. We're just switching the characteristics of it in creating that live edit, and we keep up that urgency in the mix. When the typical structure of music is that it will start off with low information at the beginning, and then as you progress, more and more information will be there. So for something like this, we're starting at the beginning of a song, much less information, creating that live edit, we're moving into a section that has a lot more energy, a lot more things are happening, and we can maintain that energy. Okay, and the key here is maintaining the energy, not so much maintaining the same groove, but maintaining that same high, that same vibe. We're just changing the tone and then the character of the mix. So definitely check out the full mix for looking at the previous songs, looking at what we're going into now and how that character, some of the dubstep, some of the trap sounds, some of that heavier music, right? And we're just going through the progressive house, more melodic stuff, creating that tension. And now we're answering it by really doubling down, living the alternative side of the dance music, looking at more the underground sort of post dubstep sounds, and just having a bit of fun because it's a lot more forgiving and really just experimenting, being creative with effects and the turntable and the vinyl spin and the breaking and the detuning and all that stuff, which is always great fun. Yeah, so just always be a little bit uncomfortable in your mix. I think that'll be the main takeaway from here. Never be too satisfied and always be willing to just go a little bit out of your comfort zone and add in a different effect. If it works. But don't hesitate because you think it might not work. Give it a shot. You never know, you might be overwhelmingly surprised how it complements. And the more you do it, you'll know what to add. And then you can have a quick starting point, but then always a little bit more. There's a great scene in the Top Gun Maverick movie, that beginning sequence, right? And he gets that Mark 10. He gets just always willing to go that extra edge, that just a little bit more, a little bit, make it a little bit uncomfortable. Okay, cool, we got there. Let's see how far we can. And sometimes it's disastrous. In that situation, the aircraft blew up and they fell and all that. But you never know. You could have got to that point and everything would have been all right. Going a little bit past that, living on that danger zone. Okay, I'll catch you in the next one. Okay, bye-bye.